Okay. Hi. There's Amanda. She's here. That's great. Okay. Amanda, you are the only interpreter.
There's one more interpreter. We're trying to get her into. She also needed the link. So let me try and send it to her.
Okay. And Amanda, I'm also going to make you a co-host.
Oh,
So
great. Thank you.
you can change the interpreters as you need to.
Okay, thank you. Great.
Okay. Well, we will
Actually, Sonia is in the list of participants if you're able to add her as a co-host. Her
okay.
last name is Newton, Newton.
Okay. Melanie, do you see her?
Sonia, Sonja Newton.
Okay, I'm trying to.
I'm looking
Her
here.
in
She's
there.
on the attendees, I think. Oh, maybe I can move her up.
I got her.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, can you bring her over here?
I did.
Okay, and then I will.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sorry everybody for the confusion, but we just had to find our interpreters. We kept losing them. Sonia, I'm gonna make you a co-host.
I appreciate that.
You guys can do your thing. Okay. Hi everybody. My name is Kathy Hall. I am filling in for Don Dew today. His travel got canceled, but then his water heater gave out on him, so he has no hot water. So the plumber's there trying to fix it. So I'm helping him out today. I want to acknowledge Melanie Davis. She's from the University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. She is the queen of the chat. So you guys will be seeing the messages from her off and on throughout the entire presentation, giving you important links if you have any questions about process, the presentations or anything. Ask Melanie. I would like to tell you that these presentations are put together by a group of 22 different disability organizations, and we call ourselves the Nebraska Disability Advocates. One thing you'll notice is that we have captioning at the bottom of the screen, and we have interpreters. The accommodations are very important to us. We want to make sure every single presentation we do is fully accessible to every person that's here viewing it. And so we have United Healthcare, the ARC of Nebraska, the Nebraska Consortium of Citizens with Disabilities, the Brain Alliance of Nebraska, and the Nebraska Council on Developmental Disabilities have all chipped in to help pay for the accommodations for these sessions. And I want to personally thank both of the interpreters, Amanda and Sonia, for what they will be doing today. It's so important. And then I want to thank Brandy for doing the captioning. Melanie will be able to access a list of the keystrokes for those that need it. They just have to contact her and she will send it to you. Depending on the device you're using, the toolbar will be either at the bottom or at the top of the screen. There is both a chat and a Q&A tab on your toolbar. And
Kathy, I hate to interrupt you, but our chat is disabled to the participants currently,
okay.
and I am unable to fix that.
And so am I, because I don't know how to fix it. I'll see if I can get a hold of Dawn on how to fix that. In the meantime, you can just go ahead and put any comments or questions into the Q&A box, and we'll just have to sift through them all to make sure all these sessions are recorded, and there will be a copy of the video on the Statewide Independent Living Council website. That's nesilk.org/copy of educational series. Melanie, would you put that in there? And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Brad Burens. He will be moderating this session, and he'll be introducing our presenter. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Yes, my name is Brad Murins, and I am the Public Policy Director at Disability Rights Nebraska, and I will be one of your panelists this afternoon. I would also like to introduce our other panelist, Michelle Nunemaker from the Division of Behavioral Health in the Department of Health and Human Services. Michelle is our resident expert on the implementation, the planning, and the operation of the 988 line, which is the topic for our discussion today. We're very happy to have Michelle here on short notice because she understands and has her finger on the pulse of this program from beginning to end. And then so I will be starting off giving a little bit of a road map for the discussion today. And then I'll be giving a little bit of some statistics and some data to hopefully give a foundation for the presentation this afternoon. Then I will turn it over to Michelle to do her presentation and to tell you all about 988 and the crisis response models that they use. And then I will wrap up with some of the issues that our other protection and advocacy organizations have noted around the country around the 988 line or around crisis response models and the 988 line. And then Kathy will will dismiss us as a class. And if you have any questions or questions for Michelle, I think we would take those after her presentation. And if you have any questions for me, you can certainly ask questions after I am done with any of my presentations. So that being said, let me embark on the journey of the first presentation. Let me pull that up here real quick. Okay, so I want to start off today's discussion with a small kind of overview and a roadmap of the discussion today, and to help maybe set the stage for and provide some context for Michelle's presentation on 988. So here's kind of the roadmap. The 988, Michelle will talk about 988. We'll have questions and answers. I'll have additional comments, and then Kathy will wrap up and dismiss us. So 988 is the Suicide and Crisis Helpline. It is a 3-digit nationwide phone number that connects people directly to the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It was previously known as the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, but federal legislation, and if I'm not mistaken, Michelle will correct me, please do. Federal legislation that was introduced to merge that and to create this 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, the subsequent version of the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. It is a national network of more than 200 crisis centers around the country that will provide support and assistance to individuals who call the Crisis Lifeline 24/7. As of July 16, 2022, all phone calls and text messages will be routed to that are submitted to 988 will be routed to a Suicide and Crisis Lifeline call center in the caller's area. That it routes calls automatically based by area code, and then it will connect that person to the nearest crisis center in that person's area code. For example, if you're calling from 703 area code, regardless of if you're in California or you're in Washington State or you're in Florida, it will route you to wherever your phone number 703 area code. And I think that's correct. Michelle will correct me if I'm wrong. So, secondary question, why are we here and what is the issue? Well, I think it's very simple. In 2020, the US had 1 death by suicide every 11 minutes. And suicide is a leading cause of death for people aged 10 to 34 years. This is coming from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, and their official statistics from 2020. On average, 1 person died by suicide every 32 hours in Nebraska. The number of deaths by suicide in Nebraska are 283, according to the CDC and their National Center for Health Statistics. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in Nebraska. And you have a whole listing of age breakouts there and the number of the leading cause within that age bracket. And those are all coming from Nebraska injury reports from our official government statistics. So that's why we're here today, that the Crisis Health Lifeline, is an option for folks to access. And we know these statistics show that there is a large and significant number of folks who are either experiencing mental health crisis or have suicide ideation or are affected or impacted by suicide, whether that's the individual, him, herself, themselves, or maybe a family member or friends or loved ones. So for further resources, to kind of give you a little sort of an advance notice or advanced precursor of some resources that you might get some more information from, there's the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services webpage on the 988 line. I thought this was a very helpful page. It has some significant resources, videos, public service announcements, a webinar on 988 and its progress. I would suggest if you want to know more, this is the first place I would go. It was the first place I went, and I thought it was very, very helpful. There's also the SAMHSA, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Their website has a 988 page as well. And on that page, there'll be a little bit of the history, some more resources, and some metrics by which they will gauge the success and efficiency of the 988 line. So if you're looking at how many calls are coming in, what's the answer ratio, how many calls are dropped, those sort of metrics, they'll all be contained on that page there. And I also thought it was important to point out to you that on the SAMHSA website page, they will also have some other social media shareables. That's what they call them. And they'll have some example videos and some other, messaging, FAQ documents, and other sort of images that you can use if you wanted to promote or you wanted to find more information on 988. So again, not an exhaustive list, but I think it's a good place to start. So with that being said, I would like to turn over the proverbial microphone to Michelle Nunemaker for her presentation on the 988 line. Unless there are any questions for me before we start that. I will stop my screen here.
Okay.
Michelle, take it away.
Thank you so much, Brad. Yeah, and you covered some of my information, so fantastic. Are you all seeing Nebraska 988 presentation?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Just wanted to make sure.
You might want to put it into a slideshow.
There it is. Are you seeing the slideshow now?
No, just
Okay.
go up it from beginning again.
Okay. All right, let me try.
Now I don't see anything.
Okay, how about now?
Now we have it.
Okay, perfect. Fantastic. So my name is Michelle Nunemaker. I am actually the System of Care Administrator here at the Division of Behavioral Health. When I started in my position about a little over a year ago, 988 planning was ramping up, and they said, hey, Michelle, we would like for you to take this on. And so I was able to jump right in. 988 is dear to my heart. I have a child who has had issues with suicidal thoughts and ideations and has had to be hospitalized as a result. And so suicide is near and dear to my heart. What you see on this screen is the Nebraska Needs You Help, Hope, and Healing in the Heartland logo. We previously were doing a true just suicide prevention type of campaign, and we wanted to stay consistent with that campaign as we rolled out with 988. So 988 went live on July 16th of this year. The previous 1-800-273-TALK, which was the suicide prevention lifeline, that number has transitioned over to that 988. So as Brad mentioned, here is some of the background. Federal legislation mandated the rollout of 988 crisis number by July of 2022 this year. It's interesting to me, if you look here, to see July 2020 at the bottom, that bottom bullet there. July 2020 is when the Federal Communications Commission finalized the rule and order and said, okay, you have now 18 months to get 988 up and rolling. I don't know how many of you know, and it was a learning opportunity for me, but 911 had decades to get up and running. So we took a big bite and had to get to chomping right away. We talk about 988 with the number going live on July 16th as kind of a soft launch. And the reasoning behind that is we have a short-term goal of a strengthened and expanded Lifeline infrastructure to respond to crisis calls, texts, and chats at any point in time. And our long-term vision for 988 is truly a system that provides more opportunities for crisis services. Primarily, we're going to be talking about services that are available in the community to keep people in their homes and in their communities. So when I think about 988, I tend to think about it as a three-legged stool, as all three legs of the stool are needed in order for 988 to be successful. Oh, it jumped ahead on me. Oops. So that first pillar is someone to call. The second is someone to respond. And then the third is somewhere to go, which also includes community supports. So for Nebraska, we have one call center. It's located at Boys Town National Hotline in Omaha. 988 is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year by trained crisis counselors. The crisis counselors are responsible for assessing for safety, de-escalating the crisis, triage and safety planning, providing referrals and resources, and activating mobile crisis response when appropriate. I want to take some time to show you what the call process looks like. Although 988 is a 3-digit number similar to 911, it is not exactly alike. When you call 911, you hear 911, how can I help you? And you're connected right away to a person. 988 still will go through vibrant behavioral health technology and process. So you'll hear call prompts at the beginning, opportunities to press 1 to connect with the veterans line, 2 with the Spanish subnetwork. And right now they are piloting a third option for individuals who identify as LGBTQ and who are 25 and younger. So that's a new queue that's available right now. And then it will tell you to remain on the line and you'll get connected to your local crisis center. Like Brad mentioned, right now, 988 does not have the ability to utilize geolocation like 911 does. There has been advocacy for that opportunity for 988 to be able to have that geolocation. But in the meantime, depending on what your area code is, that is which call center you will be routed to. The call centers all know this and they recognize that people may live in different states, and have a Nebraska phone number, or maybe living here in Nebraska, but have a California phone number. The call centers will work together to connect callers to the call center that's most appropriate for them. On this next slide, I'm actually going to play for you what it sounds like when you call 988. What you'll notice is that this time will take about a minute. So it's not a direct connection. It is going to take about a minute or so before you're connected with someone.
One moment. You have reached the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Also servicing the Veterans Crisis Line. If you are in emotional distress or suicidal crisis, or concerned about someone who might be, we're here to help.
Para español, oprime el número 2.
If you are a U.S. military veteran or current service member, or are calling about one, please press 1 now to speak with the Veterans Crisis Line. Otherwise, please remain on the line while we route your call to the nearest crisis center in our network. Your call may be monitored and recorded for quality assurance purposes. stay on the line while your call is directed to an available responder.
You can fill that too. Lifeline, how can I help? That is excellent.
So that is the 988 process. That's what you will hear when you call 988. So I wanted to show that to you. So let's talk now just about call volume in Nebraska. Currently averaging about 50 calls a day. This is a daily average increase of about 66% from the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Boys Town did run that lifeline prior to taking over 988. It was just made for an easy and smooth transition for Boys Town to do that. When we looked at the call volume for the calendar year of 2021, the Lifeline had received about 8,800 calls. And just since July of this year, I believe we've exceeded that 8,800 calls already. So saw quite a bit of an increase in the volume. Chat and text for 988 is also available right now in Nebraska. We're averaging about 1 contact every hour and a half. Text is still just the 988. You can just text 988, or you can also go online to the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline website, and there is a spot there where you can click the link and to begin that chat. So I talked a little bit about call volume. I'm going to show you some hard numbers. So as of right now, here are the amount of calls that we have received since July. And yeah, averaging, right up there, numbers just continue to keep growing, and Boys Town is doing a fantastic job. So when I talked about 988 having 3 pillars, that second pillar was someone to respond. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here after we visit the data, but I'm going to show you some information and some data around mobile crisis response. On this slide, what I want you to see here is that Boys Town or 988 will contact or activate law enforcement or emergency medical services if a caller is calling and they are screened and identified as being high risk, they have access to lethal means, and they're not willing to safety plan with a crisis counselor or somebody within or a supportive person. At that point is when mobile crisis would be offered to the individual. If the individual declines mobile crisis due to safety reasons, that's when law enforcement or emergency medical services may be contacted to make contact with that individual and check on them. So about 3.1% of calls are resulting in that emergency intervention. And then if you see in the next box, that 3.9% also includes mobile crisis activation. So doing the math, about 8.8% of the time, mobile crisis is being activated. So when you look at mobile crisis data, so far we've offered mobile crisis 120 times. The individual must consent to mobile crisis in order for us to activate those services. So we've had about 50 activations. We also ask the caller how they would like that mobile crisis intervention to take place. If they would like somebody to actually come out to their home and do a face-to-face contact with them, if they would like to have a contact over the phone, or if they would like that contact to be made via telehealth. As you can see, the majority of people right now are requesting in-person or phone. So that's great. I'm happy to see that. Nebraska is made up of 6 regional behavioral health authorities. And so I'm just kind of reporting out on their data. Region 6 is the Omaha area, and Region 5 is the Lincoln and Southeast Nebraska area. So not really surprised to see the majority of activations coming from those 2 highly populated areas of the state. And then we also do mobile crisis response for both a youth and adults. And so far we've activated for adults 44 times and for youth 6 times. So as we talk about activation, we're talking about somebody to respond. On the mobile crisis teams, we've incorporated people with lived experience on the teams. Across the state, we've identified specific training expectations, and it's expected that all teams across the state have that same, complete those same training expectations. All teams are required to do a post-crisis follow-up with the caller, and they are all required to provide referrals for services for the individual. So what does mobile crisis look like? Mobile crisis is usually made up of a team of 2 people who are responding to the individual. We highly recommend that one of those 2 individuals be somebody with peer support or somebody with lived experience. And then we also support non-law enforcement response, if that's the modality that the mobile crisis team is utilizing. When they make contact with the caller or the individual, they'll be doing kind of an assessment through motivational interviewing. And this also is taking place after the crisis de-escalation. Their number one goal is to de-escalate the crisis. And during that de-escalation, that's when they are obtaining some information which will help them to be able to make recommendations moving forward. Following mobile crisis team's contact with the individual, we do require that follow-up with that caller takes place. The first attempt at follow-up must take place within the first 24 hours. And then if they don't reach the caller at that time, then we do ask that they make at least 2 more additional attempts within 72 hours. When they are calling the consumer back to check in with them, they are checking to find out how are they feeling. They're checking to see if the safety plan that was developed is still an adequate safety plan. They're finding out if the person was able to get connected with resources. And if they were not able to be connected, the mobile crisis team will work with the caller to get them connected to resources. We have asked all of our 6 regional behavioral health authorities to identify some same day and next day appointments for outpatient services. And so they have done that, and the mobile crisis teams have that information. With the expansion of 988, mobile crisis has grown. Previously, you can see here, crisis response team members were licensed individuals. As I mentioned, we're now asking and encouraging that peer support specialists be included on the team. Just think that it's been recommended nationally, and we support that and really think it's a great idea to have people with lived experience on the teams and connecting with those people who are accessing 988. That third pillar that I talked about is a vision of somewhere to go, or those community supports. When I talk about this one, I really truly am talking about some brick and mortar types of services that will need to be brought up across the state. Again, all of our 6 behavioral health authorities have had services identified that they are required to bring up across the state. But as we all know, bringing up brick and mortar type of services is going to take some time. We do have a couple of crisis receiving and stabilization units across the state. Our goal is to expand that to all areas of the state. I talked about that access to same day or next day services, which includes assessments, outpatient services, and medication management. We are working on a bed registry program so that we can see right away where there is open beds for individuals who may need an inpatient type of service, so that they're not sitting and waiting or having to call around to different places. We can go right away and see where there's a bed open. And then we're working on some crisis respite for youth and adults. One of the great things that happened with 988 is that we expanded from just being a suicide prevention line to actually being a mental health and substance use crisis line. So it's any kind of behavioral health crisis that people can call in for. So we're working on building some respite services, and we are working on building some peer-run hospital diversion or crisis respite type of programs here in the state. There is one I know of in Lincoln, Kia House, and I think there's some others, but we're going to continue to grow and expand those services. And then I wanted to share this slide with you about feedback. It was noted from Boys Town that typically they didn't receive kind of feedback from callers, but with 988, that was an unexpected positive outcome. And I wanted to take some time to just share these with you because I think it's really, it really demonstrates what 988 is and how broad 988 can be. You have a caller calling because they needed help and actually ended up going into inpatient psychiatric hospital. And even through that was able to get connected with outpatient therapy and supports. And she just was incredibly grateful for the help that 988 gave her when she called in. The other one I like is on that bottom row, and it's on the opposite side. And that's the caller had a rough day yesterday, was not suicidal, but needed to vent and an ear. Just wanted to call and say thank you for what they do and how much 988 was able to impact that caller. So we went from, significant crisis being placed in inpatient to even just somebody saying, I just needed somebody to talk to. And that's what 988, that's just that broad scope of what 988 is. And then here at the end, I have my email. So feel free to email me with, questions, concerns, whatever. But like Brad mentioned, that 988 website off of our Division of Behavioral Health webpage, that's a great place to go. We do have a marketing toolkit there, which like Brad mentioned, includes some videos and public service announcements. There's also flyers and posters and presentations and social media posts and things like that you are more than welcome to go on and share on social media for providers or businesses, on your business pages, or to put in your lobby, or just kind of wherever. It's really been a grassroots effort to share the information about 988, but we are working on actually having a more formalized marketing campaign coming up in the next year or so. So with that, Brad, I'll hand it back over to you.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. That was very helpful and very informative. I learned something new from your presentation, even after reading your presentation before and reading all the literature. I thought that was very informative. I learned something new. We do have a couple of different questions in the chat box. And the first one is, let me get up there. If my PSAP receives a behavioral themed call and they're not trained to know specifically about those behavioral issues, if it's deemed a non-life-threatening incident, is it acceptable to transfer or advise the person to call 988, or should we direct them to local authorities?
I would love to have you be transferring or giving that phone number for 988 to those callers.
Great.
Can I ask you to explain what PSAP is?
Yes, it is a public service access point. So it's often where the 911 call lines are located, those call centers are located. Those typically are considered to be what we call PSAPs, those public service access points.
Great. And then another follow-up question around the public service access points. If you receive a call from someone that needs local intervention, how will you and ultimately the public service action or point operators know the location and where to send services to the person?
So during the call, the crisis counselor is gathering that information about where they live, getting address, whatever phone numbers they can gather, names, that kind of information. So that's how that's the information that they would share with the mobile crisis team if the mobile crisis team were to be activated. And that share comes through a warm transfer. So the crisis counselor will actually stay on the line with the caller, conference call the mobile crisis team in, say, hey, I'm getting you connected. This is, here's so-and-so with, maybe it's like Douglas County, that will be doing the mobile crisis response, and then they will also communicate. So we don't just disconnect that call. It's a warm transfer, whether that be a warm transfer to 911 if it is an emergency. 988 will do that through a warm transfer, staying on the line with the caller, and same with that activation of mobile crisis.
Wonderful, thank you. So another question I kind of had is, Michelle, what do you think are the strengths of 988?
So I think the very first one is that it's a 3-digit number now to remember, as opposed to a full 1-800 number to remember. So right away, I think that's the number one benefit. The other benefit, like I talked about, was that expansion from being a suicide prevention line to being a true behavioral health crisis line. So any kind of crisis. The other thing that I think is a strength is that we as Nebraska actually had a lot of this in place prior to the federal legislation that we do this. We already in Nebraska had adult and youth mobile crisis services in our state. And then we also already had the Lifeline in our state. So we were able to stay with the same call center who has the relationships built, who has that referral repository built. They had a lot of it right away, already there and already in place. And so for us, it's been a pretty easy transition over, and it's really going very, very well here in Nebraska. We get shouted out to on several of the different national calls about how far we've come and how far along we are compared to other states.
Well, that's better than our football program. Sorry. I'm a Husker grad. I love Husker football. That's just made sarcasm. I love them. That's why I can say that. 2 other questions I have. First question is, I know that in our conversations that we've had, the department or the division has really seemed really eager to promote this program and this Lifeline. And so, so I guess my question is, how eager or would it be, are you looking for other opportunities to spread the word and raise awareness of this program? And if so, how would folks get in touch with you, or would that be something that you would entertain working with and collaborating with other organizations or whatever to help promote the idea beyond just what's on the 988 webpage?
Absolutely. I am always willing to share information about 988. It's been great. I've been asked to come and present at several different conferences this fall about 988, and I am always happy to come and present to any group about 988. Please just feel free to send me an email. Melanie, can you please make sure that my email makes it into the transcripts? And then I will also send Melanie Thank you. I will also send Melanie a copy of the presentation. The video will not be in there, but that video is located on the webpage. And my contact information is at the end of the PowerPoint, so you will also have it there. Yes, feel free to reach out to me with any of those requests.
Great.
Brad,
Yeah.
could you go to the chat? There's a couple comments in
Yep.
there.
That's where I'm headed right now. So one of the comments is question from Gary says, there's over 6,000 square miles in Cherry County. How are they going to find a person if the individual is not forthcoming about their location?
If they are not forthcoming about their location, and depending on the severity of the situation, what 988 will do is then they will contact law enforcement. Law enforcement has or 911, who does have the ability to do geolocation. Just 988 does not have that ability right now. So we'll partner with the folks who do have that ability to ensure that we are making contact with that person.
Great. And then, a follow-up note comment was that, in that Cherry County, there's, they're located a lot very close to like Sioux Falls and 605 area code. And some of those folks who live in Nebraska might have or might get pooled with those 605 area codes. Again, how would you recommend, or how do they think about how to find those folks, even if without that geolocation?
So again, if you live in Nebraska and you have an area code that is different than 402, 308, or the 531, you're going to get routed to whatever state your area code goes to. Now, what you would do when you call is you would say, well, I live in Nebraska. And so let's say, for example, let's use South Dakota as an example. If you have a South Dakota area code, you'll get the South Dakota call center. You'll say, I live in Nebraska. And so then South Dakota will work with Boys Town to get you connected to the Boys Town call center so that you're receiving services and referrals in Nebraska. So that all of the call centers know that this is an issue. And so they are all just partnering and working together to connect people to the call center that's most appropriate for them.
So it sounds to me, Michelle, kind of like there's no wrong door. I mean,
correct.
That even if you do get pooled into, like I had my cell number when I first moved back to Nebraska was still my Virginia area code. And I've got friends that still have, cell phone numbers in, their respective states. So, but it sounds to me like even if you were to get caught up in a different area code or something like that, that there would be ways to get around the larger issue of which state are you in, or can I get connected to the Nebraska lifeline, even though I got hooked up into the South Dakota lifeline. So it's kind of like a no wrong door. Even if you have a call anyway, and then try to figure out how to get you to where you need to go. Is that kind of would that be a correct statement?
That is exactly correct. There is no wrong door. The states, we are continuing to push with the FCC that we have access to that geolocation, which would then just ensure that callers would be routed to the call center that their phone kind of pings off of. So we're working on that. We're continuing to advocate for that. And the other great thing is, as states are coming together, all the time to talk about what's working, what's not working, and ensuring that we're all kind of working together. The Region 7 area, so kind of the Iowa, South Dakota, Missouri, Nebraska, Kansas, we're in kind of that region together. And we also meet quarterly to talk with each other too. So there is a ton of conversation and communication taking place between the call centers in the various states.
Great. And I also have another quick question. I don't mean to dominate the questions, but I don't see many in the chat box. Hint, hint, hint. So I noticed there were several like work groups, or there was a there's groups that have been, on planning and in different aspects of the 988 line. Are there any opportunities for members of the public or folks who are interested in 988 or the crisis response, this sort of, larger issue? Is there any opportunities or availability for input or comment or participation on any sort of governing, not governing body, but, committees or work groups or planning groups?
Yes, so still in place, still active. We have our stakeholder advisory team. And so that stakeholder advisory group will meet once quarterly. And so that would be the group that if you wanted to be on and provide some feedback or ask questions or just want to be involved with what's happening and learning about what's happening, that would be a great group to get onto. And again, all you have to do, send me an email, let me know that that's the group that you want to be added to, and I'll get you connected.
It sounds like Michelle's a no wrong door too.
I do my best. I do my best. I don't know everything, but I do my best.
Well, I think that's all we can really expect of you. I don't think I have any more questions that I can think of. Are there any more questions from the audience and from the membership? I'll give a minute or so. Okay. Here we go. Has there ever been a test run to see if a call that 988 receives, will the caller location be forwarded or displayed on the 911 mapping system? Gary, is there any more explanation that you might want to context to that?
So when 988 transfers a call, if it were to transfer it to that person's 911, whatever 911 can see, they can see that once that call is picked up. So it's always going to transfer to a local PSAP. Like when I talked about the data previously, about 96% of calls are being managed by those crisis counselors there at 988. There's only been about 3% of the time that those calls have had to be transferred to a 911 or a law enforcement center, and only about 1% of the time has mobile crisis even been activated. So that speaks to me very highly on how well-trained those crisis counselors are in de-escalating and providing services.
Excuse me, Michelle, Brad. I have unmuted Gary so he can talk directly to you. So Gary, you can go ahead and talk, I believe, now.
Yeah, I was just curious if it was ever tested that if you needed to transfer a 988 caller to our local PSAP, if that would come through as a 911 call to me, and we could get that location on our mapping system. Do you guys have the 911 numbers for PSAP centers around the state so you can transfer them directly into our 911 system?
We
do. They
do.
come in to a regular landline? Okay.
No, we have all of your numbers. Boys Town has all of that information, and
Okay.
all transfers will be done via a warm transfer. So if a call is transferred to your PSAP, you should be getting that call actually from the crisis counselor, letting you know that this is coming over.
Right.
We don't want to drop any callers or just assume that once we hit transfer, they're taken care of.
Right. Yeah. And that's what I was wondering, if my 911 system, if it comes in on that, if it's going to map the 988 center's location, or if it's going to map the caller's location, or if it's going to map anything at all.
That is above my pay grade, Gary. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Sorry.
That's okay. That was just a question. I mean,
Yeah.
We have such a vast rural area up here, and locations are crucial. I mean, as far as a quick response, if we need to, it's hard to know where people are.
Yeah, and we do. Yes, I agree with you. Like I said, we continue to advocate big time with FCC to provide that geolocation to 988. And then we also do have a work group with some of the 911 PSAP folks that have decided to be on that work group. So there's been a lot of even communication with the various PSAPs across the state about 988 and the 988 process.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then one more final little comment, Michelle. I just want to reiterate and make sure that it's clear. Callers who call into the 988 line and have an issue or have a reason to call, and maybe there needs to be a response, but you're not always going to send the police, right? It's
Correct.
not always going to be, law enforcement coming out. It could be a counselor or somebody in that sort of mental health or human service field. And I heard, and did I hear you say that you're looking at increasing the use of peers in providing some of that initial response to an emergency situation?
Yes, we are. And we're looking at, like I said, the kind of at a minimum, a 2-person team. Peer support would be there just to help kind of open those lines of communication and be able to say, I've been here, I've been in your shoes before. You're not alone. It's going to be okay. And be able to just kind of help and stay connected with that person and provide some of those peer support types of services to the individual.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. I think I've peppered you with enough questions. I will stop now. And then I will, which is hard for me. It's hard for me to stop asking questions. So, anybody who knows me knows that's the truth. So let me transition over into some comments that I thought would be important to kind of raise up, and some of the issues and things that our protection and advocacy system are thinking about and raising in terms of the context of crisis response and these lifelines. So let me share my screen and get that rolling. So everyone can see my slide, right? Okay. So again, I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that our network has seen. And I guess the first thing I want to say is I don't think that these comments are mutually exclusive with what Michelle was talking about in her presentation. And I also don't think that these comments or these ideas that were expressed in January of 2021, I don't intend them to be used to poke a finger or throw shade at Michelle. I don't think that's the case, and that's certainly not the way I intend these comments. I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. In fact, I'm glad to hear what Michelle was saying, because I think a lot of the things that Michelle was saying and the direction that 988 is going actually aligns with a lot of the things that our protection and advocacy principles. We have those principles in our organization. So the National Disability Rights Network is sort of like the trade association in our national network of protection and advocacy organizations. And so they had met and had developed some working guidelines about thinking about these emergency response models. And here are the top 6. There should be a minimal police involvement in responding to non-violent community emergencies. And again, I think that was demonstrated pretty well in what Michelle was saying. Again, I don't think are these mutually exclusive. That interactions with people in crisis should be non-violent and non-coercive, and that assistance should be offered on a voluntary basis. I'm happy to hear that lines up with what Michelle was saying earlier in terms of the response for 988. That outcomes should not rely on incarceration or involuntary commitment, but that they should be, again, voluntary and working with non-coercive and trying to get folks the help that they need. And again, not to rely on those two tools. I'm not saying, and I don't think that we would be saying that that never, ever, ever, that should not be the reliance. We should rely on other things that are more, more non-coercive. People in crisis that are seeking assistance are not necessarily people who have a mental illness, and thus sometimes those crises do not require a mental illness or mental health intervention. And again, what I think what Michelle was saying was that the idea behind the line is expanded behind just the suicide response line to the mental health crisis in a more expansive substance use mental health situation. So I think that, again, that matches up with this. The role of peer support and advocacy should be central to the community-based response program. And again, I was really happy to hear that that's a focus and a really strong intent on growing that perspective and growing that part in terms of the response with the 988. And then, the last one we have on this slide is that, the affected communities should be involved in the development and implementation of these response programs. And I'm happy to see that NAMI Nebraska in particular was invited and was participating on the stakeholder group and some of the work groups. So I think that there is some level of, those affected communities. And I'm also happy to see the affirmative response to my question about is the work that this, groups are working on behind the scenes, are they open to the public, and are they receptive to, that sort of affected community participation? And I think Michelle's answer is a definitive yes. So again, I don't think any of these things are mutually exclusive for what Michelle's talking about in the direction and the composition of 988. I think a lot of these things are complementary, and I would suggest that that's probably one of the things that Nebraska is getting accolades for. But I don't know. But I'm happy to see a lot of these things are contained within what we have existing now. Then also, this slide and these ideas come from the Protection and Advocacy for Individuals Mental Illness, Protection and Advocacy for Individuals with Mental Illness program, national program that funds our agency's work on mental illness. And they have a quarterly call, and these are some of the issues that the individuals that are on the National Advisory Council, Mental Illness Advisory Council, had raised around this issue in January of 2021. And I think a lot of these ideas and concepts are either existing in the status quo or are going to be, are that direction that Michelle's talking about in terms of growing the program and where it's going into the future. So again, interactions with people in crisis should be nonviolent and non-coercive, so that, a response and emergency can be on a voluntary basis. I'm happy to hear that in Michelle's presentation. People shouldn't be forced in situations that they don't want. That's usually non-productive or counterproductive for the outcomes. And again, there's concern that it might end up defaulting to the relying on solely the incarceration or involuntary commitment. But I'm happy to hear that there's the focus on peer support and not always responding with the law enforcement aspect. And that there's yes, go ahead.
No, and I just kind of wanted to jump into, because again, this is a big part of the spirit of 988, and really where 988 came from was that people should be able to stay in their communities and in their homes and receive services that are appropriate for them without having to go to a hospital or a jail. So I think that, again, you had kind of asked me strengths about 988, and this whole spirit of 988, I think, is just fantastic. And that's what we are all working towards.
Yeah, I would agree. Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that. And by the way, Michelle, feel free to jump in. Anytime you've got a comment on one of these things, jump in. I have no problem with that. Again, nonviolent, non-criminal calls. So for example, mental health calls, substance abuse, or homelessness, welfare check, those type of issues, those type of calls should be, again, try to be redirected to, a non-police or non-law enforcement intervention, if at all possible. Again, it's a nonviolent, non-criminal. So, I think the idea is that we want to have the response be, commensurate with the type of call that they're making. And again, I'm happy to hear, Michelle's answer to my softball question about, is it not always law enforcement? I think that again proves that, they're really taking these considerations into really thinking about how to set the program together.
Brad, I want to jump in real quick, but I want to be very clear. At this point, there are some teams that still take law enforcement out with them as a safety precaution for themselves. But the role and the expectation of law enforcement is just to be there and make sure that the situation is safe for the responder. And then that is solely kind of what their role is. So I really want to be clear that if you call 988, I am not saying that there will not be law enforcement. There may be law enforcement, but I just want to be clear about that.
Right. No, that's fair. That's a fair statement. That's a fair statement. I'm glad you clarified that. Again, peer support and advocacy is key, and that should be central. Again, need to be involved. And I think another issue that, and I'm glad Michelle talked about this. Well, one of the other things that I saw repeated through the literature that was raised within this entity was that, diversion is important, but we have to have an adequate array of places to go to divert folks to. And so, again, I'm not saying that that's inadequate or that, we're not doing a good job of that. But again, I think the idea is that, that there may be other variables that have an impact on 988 that we should be thinking about in terms of adequacy of staffing, adequacy of other programs that would support 988 in terms of its referrals and that sort of thing. Again, so the question is, diversion is great, but we have to have that robust array to make sure that people's needs are met when there is a referral to whatever system that referral might be to. And so again, we know this council was talking about trauma-based and culturally competent, sensitive, resources that would be the diversion goals and outcomes. And again, and kind of following up with what Michelle was saying earlier, is that when you have one of the things that this group was raising was that when you have that co-responder model, when you have the police and the non-law enforcement, the going out, I think there needs to their situation or their issue was, it probably needs to be spelled out, how is that response going to be, who's going to respond first and how are they going to interact with that individual, who's going to go forward and who's going to go back. Again, not saying that it shouldn't be or never, ever, ever have that co-responder model. But I think that the point that they're making here in raising up in the discussion around 988 and responding, again, is, it should be, we should clearly spell out what the responsibilities and what the sort of like the operations are going to be, if it's this way, if it's that way, or depending on the nature of the call. And those are some of the things that were raised or issues that came up in the discussions within the larger protection and advocacy organizations around the country. Some of the things that I thought might be pertinent and things for this group, either this group panelists or the audience members in general, something to think about and when we're moving forward and operating 988. This slide here is my contact information. So we're here in Lincoln. So by all means, if you have any questions or need information or need to get connected to folks, again, I'm also a no wrong door. I'll be happy to help connect you with anybody that you want, or if I can help out in any way, I'd be happy to do that. So let me stop my screen. And are there any questions or comments or anything about this last part of the issues that were raised within the TNA network? And again, I do not intend those slides and those comments to be negative or pejorative for what Michelle was saying or to Nebraska's 988. In fact, I think a lot of those concepts and issues that were raised have been thought about and at least addressed somewhat within Nebraska's 988. And I'm very happy to hear that we're getting, such good accolades around the country for what our efforts here in Nebraska. And I tip my proverbial hat to you, Michelle, and to the division for your successes on 988 around the country and getting those accolades. One last time, does anybody have any questions for me or for Michelle or anything that you've heard today or any comments?
It doesn't seem so.
Wow. Okay, we've given you enough information. We've extinguished all of your questions. Well, Michelle, congratulations. Way to go. We make a good team. Kathy, do you want to wrap it up and then dismiss us? Give us back 15 minutes of our day.
I sure will. Just give me a few minutes here. We do hold these sessions, webinars, once a month on the first Thursday of every month. So if you can think of a topic that you would like us to present on, feel free to contact Dawn at nesilc.org or contact any of the other organizations that were listed on the flyer you received. Next month, our presentation will be on January 5th, 2023. And the top ADAPT, ADAPT, is a group that's just getting started in Nebraska. And it's a grassroots organization. And we have been working with the legislature to find a way for testimony adhering by people with disabilities to be easier, since accessible transportation is something that does not exist in Nebraska. So for this session, they are going to be starting a direct email portal for citizens with disabilities. And you can submit your testimony online. And your name will be going right into the committee report that you receive. So on January 6th, we will be doing a training on this email portal, and we'll be having somebody that will be able to help you with writing your own testimony. So we need to make sure people with disabilities are accessing the system and making our voices heard. Anyway, and on that note, time to get off my soapbox. I am gonna let everybody out a few minutes early. Thank you very much for attending today.